Maybe it is time to start again, the life that I've been wasting. Maybe it is not the world but me that's got to do the changing. Maybe it is me who lost the beat when I fell out of line and I caught their attention. I can change the world that I'm living. So the tension of the unexpected is where I'd like to begin this talk today. Now, I'll circle back at the end of this talk as to why I sang this song. But basically, we've been asked the question, how can one become a mind shifter that guides others towards transformation? Well, my experience with mind shifting can be encapsulated in two spaces. One as an educator, and the other one as a producer of interactive narrative works. And in my 15 years of working in these two spheres, I've had the pleasure and pain, frustration and excitement of participating in a profound transition. The transition brought by the digital revolution to the entertainment and cultural industries. Now, all of you have heard this talk before, so I'm not going to go on and on about it, but we've heard the talk about the shift from analog to digital, the shift from hierarchical to networked, the shift from centralized to distributed, and how these particular changes have affected the production value chain from development to distribution, business models, creative processes, storytelling. But today I'd like to concentrate on one particular group in the entertainment and cultural industry for whom this transition required was to shift their mind entirely. The creator. When I founded the Media Lab in 1997, I was 27, and somehow I managed to convince Wayne Clarkson and Norman Jewison that I could shepherd the Canadian film and television industry into the digital age. I didn't really even know who Norman Jewison was. Who knows who Norman Jewison here? Who has heard of Norman Jewison? Yeah, some of you? Jesus Christ Superstar, Moonstruck, Soldier Story, big Oscar-winning director. Anyway, at that time, I didn't really even know who he was, let alone how to create a media lab within a film school. But it was the late 90s. People were optimistic, generous, and a lot of people took a risk on the young and the new. And even Richard Saul Wurman, founder of TED, there he is, joined our advisory council. And a lot of people flocked to our launch party to see what manner of Trojan horse this new entity would be. And what a Trojan horse it was. And so for 15 years, starting from scratch, I've been learning and practicing how to be a creator in the digital age, a mind shifter who guides others towards transformation. And mainly, what I learned is that I need to cultivate a set of tensions which I think are part and parcel of what it means to be a creator today. I have learned how to coexist with the tension of being arrogant and humble, with the tension of being rigid and flexible, and with the tension of being open and closed. Let's start with arrogance and humility. How many of you guys thought, my God, all these people who want to build story worlds, there's something inherently arrogant about that statement. I want to build a story world. You have to have a bit of a God complex to take the helm of an interactive story production, let alone a transmedia one. Because to build great story worlds requires an unprecedented attention to detail, as the producer designs with others the relationships and intricate dependencies among stories, characters, themes, experiences, platforms, technologies, using all sorts of devices like sticky notes, threads, mind maps, wireframes, and sometimes to the point of even creating your own authoring platform. And as boundaries between media become even more porous, the desire of transmedia creators to know all and be all will be insatiable. But here's the rub, because there is a bit of a joke being played here. Because as God will always face the chaos wreaked by free will, transmedia creators and producers will always face the humility inherent in participatory forms. One needs to be arrogant to even begin the process of creating complex participatory experiences, but one needs to be humble in the face of everything we can't control or know, as audiences demand to take over the story. Hence, to be rigid and flexible is also key. We're running out of battery here. In 2000, I worked with some emerging creators who had a dream of remaking our image of Canada by letting Canadians tell their own stories. These were Netscape days. So this was pre-UGC, user-generated content. This was pre-blogging. The main sites at that time were these ugly home pages. I don't know if you guys remember, where people were using these twinkling text fonts. This was pre-social media. You remember that. This was pre-social media, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Pinterest, pre-video on the internet, and Flash was basically the hottest thing online. So though their vision today seems a total no-brainer, at that time, the call for a democratic, bottoms-up, participatory form of storytelling was unheard of, let alone something that was done by a federal agency and institution like the Canadian Film Centre. But we made it. We raised the money, and even the Historical Society of Canada, Historica, came on board, along with the federal government and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And as social networks on the web were not mainstream yet, we used the oldest networks, highways and roads, and we converted an Airstream trailer into a digital classroom, and we traveled from coast to coast in Canada, stopping off at the computer access centers in public libraries across the country. And I think our funders' assumptions were that the stories that we would end up be curating would be the type of Canadiana stories that they had expected. Stories about beavers, Mounties, hockey, cold winter, etc. You know? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but I do think that that's what they were expecting. But what soon became the reality was that the people who really took the Great Canadian Story Engine for their own were the immigrant families who were in these computer access centers in droves, because that's where they made their resumes and that's where they got their jobs. And they're extremely sort of happy and really touched that they were participating in this new kind of recreation of what Canada meant. So out of a highly planned, designed vision emerged a much more important story, and even perhaps a truer one than what Canada is today. Because the reality is, vision needs to be rigid enough to withstand all the barriers that will block its way, but equally important, it has to be flexible enough to allow that vision to breathe or to have life as new possibilities emerge from the work. So I hope you're getting the gist of my message here, and it's really a simple one, that participatory forms of storytelling, of which transmedia is an example, requires creators to rethink their roles, to rethink who they are. No longer completely in control of everything, the creator needs to be humble and flexible to allow true audience participation to flourish. Actually, what ends up happening is the creator is rendered humble and made flexible as audiences participate in unanticipated ways. So sometimes what ends up happening is the pendulum swings too far. People think that, well, maybe creators should just be this kind of open all the time and perhaps be 24-hour story discos. And the move towards oversharing on the web is really taking on an amazing turn as the web almost becomes the primary vehicle for open secrets. But I think it's important to note that at the same time, though, creators need to make room for intimate rumination, personal reflection, or dreaming. Because even more now, we need to give the unconscious time to do its work. As information overload and global open access become the norm. Because when else will synthesis happen? When I first met Norman Jewison, he told me this story about when he started to cut things digitally. And he said he was amazed by how, fast his editor worked, and how you could undo an edit move, and how you could think of what you want to do and then all of a sudden be able to visualize it in front of yourself. And it really seemed miraculous. But then he paused and he said, he also missed the Steenbeck, because in the end, digital took away his time for reflection, his time to ruminate on which edit move seemed to tell the story best. And more importantly, the time to work out that process in his head. If you look at these three tensions that I have spoken about, you notice that there's a movement going on from the self to others, from feeling we have to control to knowing that we don't, from being confident in our identity to letting ourselves grow into whatever we want to grow into, from secret dreaming to the sharing of our thoughts. And I think at the end, the most salient word to remember here is shift, to move from one state to another and back again. The more we become comfortable in that, the more we can play with what such movement or mind shifting can afford us. The transformation of dreams into reality and reality into dreams. So why did I sing that song? As you all heard, I'm a very good date for karaoke night, but I'm not exactly going to win the Eurovision Song Contest, and I have no intention of applying. But there were two reasons that I wanted to start with a song. The first thing is that I wanted to figure out a way to exemplify in a visceral fashion some of the important characteristics of this new kind of creativity. I have ideas, even if they are imperfect, and to involve audiences in the process, even or especially if it means risking failure, because every failure is a learning event. And this particular experiment that I did in the beginning was to see if the usual linear form of a TED Talk could be improved with that jolt of creative tension, which was all about the tensions that I spoke about throughout my talk. The second reason was that this song, called Point of View from the Transmedia musical Prison Dancer, captures the questions that Nicoletta has tasked all of us to discuss today. How do we guide ourselves and others through the process of transformation? And for me, it's about being arrogant and humble, rigid and flexible, and open and closed.